In this episode, we focus on something that quietly determines whether all the policies, controls, and dashboards you build actually matter: culture. When people hear culture, they sometimes think it is a soft topic, like posters on a wall or motivational talk. But in risk governance, culture is a hard driver of outcomes. Culture is what people do when nobody is watching, when deadlines are close, and when the easiest path is not the safest path. With artificial intelligence, AI, culture matters even more because the tools are accessible, the benefits feel immediate, and the risks can be invisible until they become public. Strengthening AI risk culture means building an environment where people want to do the right thing, know how to do the right thing, and feel safe admitting uncertainty or mistakes. By the end, you should understand how incentives, accountability, and psychological safety fit together to shape responsible behavior. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful way to start is to define risk culture in plain language. Risk culture is the shared set of beliefs and habits that shape how people notice risk, talk about risk, and act on risk. It includes what people reward, what they punish, and what they tolerate. In an organization with a healthy risk culture, someone can raise a concern early and be taken seriously, even if the concern later turns out to be a false alarm. In an unhealthy risk culture, people learn that speaking up creates trouble, so they stay quiet until the problem is too big to hide. AI risk culture also includes how people think about the technology itself, such as whether they treat it as a helpful tool that must be checked or as an authority that should be trusted automatically. If people see AI outputs as inherently objective, they will over-rely, and that is a cultural risk even if the model is technically strong. Culture turns individual decisions into patterns, and patterns are what create sustained safety or sustained harm. To strengthen culture, you need to understand a common failure mode: the mismatch between stated values and lived incentives. Many organizations say safety and trust matter, but their day-to-day rewards tell a different story, like rewarding speed, volume, and launch dates without rewarding careful validation or responsible restraint. When incentives push speed without balance, people learn that risk work is optional, and optional risk work gets skipped under pressure. In AI, that pressure is intense because teams can demonstrate quick wins with prototypes, and leaders often want the benefits fast. A culture shift begins when leaders make it clear that responsible use is part of performance, not a side task. This does not mean punishing every mistake. It means recognizing and rewarding the behaviors that prevent harm, such as asking for review early, choosing safer constraints, and documenting decisions so others can learn. Incentives are powerful because they shape behavior even when nobody explicitly tells people what to do. Incentives do not have to be complicated, but they do need to be consistent and visible. If teams know they will be praised for launching quickly but ignored for preventing an incident, they will prioritize launching quickly. If teams know they will be supported when they pause a risky release for good reasons, they will pause when it matters instead of pushing forward and hoping nothing goes wrong. Incentives also include the practical incentives of time and convenience, because people choose the path that is easiest when they are busy. If the safe way to use AI is slow and confusing while the unsafe way is fast and simple, then the unsafe way becomes the default no matter what the policy says. Strengthening culture, therefore, includes building safe workflows that are easy, such as approved tools, clear guidance, and predictable review paths for higher-risk use cases. When the safe path is the easy path, incentives and safety align, and culture improves without constant enforcement. Accountability is the second pillar, and it is often misunderstood as blame. Accountability is not about finding someone to punish after something bad happens. It is about ensuring someone has responsibility for keeping risk within agreed boundaries over time. AI systems often sit across teams, with data owned by one group, the model owned by another, and the user workflow owned by a third. Without clear accountability, everyone assumes someone else is watching, and then nobody is truly watching. Strengthening culture means making accountability normal and specific, so people know who owns the decision, who owns the controls, and who owns monitoring and incident response. Accountability also clarifies who can accept residual risk and under what conditions, which prevents silent risk acceptance that happens by default. When accountability is clear, people can raise issues to the right place quickly, and leaders can support corrective action without confusion. In a healthy culture, accountability feels like clarity and stewardship, not like threat. One practical way to build accountability in a culture is to make ownership part of how work is described, not an afterthought. When a new AI use case is proposed, a healthy culture expects that the use case has a purpose owner, a risk owner, and an operational owner who can coordinate changes and monitoring. When a system changes scope, like moving from internal-only support to customer-facing interaction, the culture expects reassessment and explicit approval, not quiet expansion. When incidents occur, the culture expects a calm record of what happened, what was done, and what will change, rather than informal conversations that disappear. Accountability also includes how leaders respond when someone surfaces a problem. If leaders respond by shooting the messenger, accountability becomes silence, because nobody will volunteer to own risk. If leaders respond by supporting containment and learning, accountability becomes safer, because ownership is seen as a respected role that protects the organization and its users. Psychological safety is the third pillar, and it may be the most important for preventing AI incidents from growing. Psychological safety means people feel safe to speak up, ask questions, admit uncertainty, and report mistakes without fear of humiliation or retaliation. This does not mean there are no standards or consequences for intentional misconduct, but it does mean that honest mistakes and early warnings are treated as opportunities to reduce harm. In AI governance, psychological safety matters because many risks are discovered first by frontline users, analysts, and engineers who notice something odd. If those people feel they must hide the issue to avoid blame, the issue will persist until it becomes visible through customer harm or public exposure. Psychological safety also improves decision quality because people are more willing to say what they do not know, which leads to better validation and better controls. In a culture with low psychological safety, people pretend certainty, and pretend certainty is one of the most dangerous conditions in risk work. These three pillars reinforce each other, and the culture becomes strongest when they are aligned instead of competing. Incentives without accountability create cheerleading, where teams are rewarded for activity, but nobody is responsible for outcomes. Accountability without psychological safety creates fear, where people hide problems and wait for instructions rather than acting early. Psychological safety without incentives can become talk without action, where people discuss concerns, but nothing changes because responsible behavior is not valued in performance. A healthy AI risk culture aligns all three. Leaders reward responsible behavior, ownership is clear, and people can surface concerns early without being punished for honesty. That alignment is what allows a program to scale, because scaling AI without scaling culture leads to more shadow use, more misuse, and more surprises. For exam thinking, when you see a scenario where teams are hiding use or where issues are discovered late, it is often a culture signal, not just a technical signal. Culture is the environment that determines whether controls are followed and whether monitoring signals are acted on. A beginner-friendly way to see culture in action is to think about how people treat model outputs during everyday work. In a healthy culture, people treat AI outputs as drafts or suggestions that require verification when stakes are high. They understand that fluent language does not guarantee truth, and they feel empowered to challenge outputs that seem wrong. They also know when to stop and escalate, such as when outputs include sensitive information, unsafe guidance, or discriminatory language. In an unhealthy culture, people are pressured to use outputs as is to save time, and they may fear admitting they do not trust the system because it could make them look inefficient. Over time, that leads to over-reliance, automation creep, and decisioning harm, especially when outputs influence approvals, prioritization, or customer commitments. Culture therefore shapes how humans interact with AI, which is a major part of risk. Technical controls matter, but cultural habits often determine whether those controls are used properly. Incentives can be strengthened with simple, concrete practices that show people what is valued. Leaders can publicly recognize teams that delayed a release to add monitoring, or teams that redesigned a workflow to reduce leakage risk, or teams that improved fairness outcomes through better validation. Recognition matters because it signals to the broader organization that responsible restraint is not punished. Incentives also show up in how goals are set, such as including measures of control effectiveness, incident readiness, and safe adoption rather than only counting new features or productivity gains. Another incentive lever is reducing friction, such as providing clear approved tools and easy access to guidance, because convenience is a powerful incentive that often beats written policy. When governance teams help product teams succeed safely, incentives shift naturally because safe work becomes the fastest work. A culture strengthens when people feel that governance is part of getting good results, not a separate obstacle course. Accountability strengthens when it is paired with clear decision rights and clear escalation paths. People should know who can approve high-risk use cases, who can accept residual risk, and who can pause a feature when harm is plausible. If these rights are unclear, people either act too slowly because they are afraid to overstep, or they act too quickly because they assume permission. Both are risky. Accountability also improves when responsibilities are documented in ways that are easy to find, not buried in informal conversations. When someone asks who owns monitoring for a system, the organization should be able to answer quickly, because that answer determines how fast the organization can respond to drift and misuse. Accountability is also strengthened by routine reviews, where owners report on risk signals, control effectiveness, and changes in scope. These reviews are not meant to punish. They are meant to keep ownership active and visible, which is how accountability becomes a habit rather than a name on a chart. Psychological safety is strengthened through consistent leadership behavior, especially in moments when problems are surfaced. When someone reports that a tool produced a harmful output, the first response should focus on containment and learning, not on personal blame. Leaders can ask what happened, what exposure exists, and what the next safe action is, rather than asking who caused it. Over time, people learn whether reporting is welcomed or punished based on these moments, not based on slogans. Psychological safety also improves when organizations create clear reporting pathways, so raising a concern does not require social courage or political navigation. If a person can report a near miss through a known channel and receive a respectful response, reporting becomes normal. That normal reporting is one of the most effective risk controls because it surfaces weak signals early. Without psychological safety, weak signals become hidden, and hidden signals are how incidents grow. AI risk culture also depends on how the organization handles mistakes, because mistakes are inevitable in complex systems. A mature culture distinguishes between a good faith mistake, a repeated pattern of negligence, and intentional misuse, and it responds differently to each. Good faith mistakes should lead to education, process improvements, and safer defaults, because the goal is prevention and learning. Patterns of negligence should lead to stronger accountability and perhaps restrictions, because repeated neglect indicates that incentives and expectations are not being taken seriously. Intentional misuse should lead to firm consequences, because it breaks trust and creates deliberate exposure. This distinction matters because if every mistake is treated as a scandal, people stop reporting and the organization loses visibility. A culture that learns from mistakes is not permissive. It is disciplined because it uses mistakes to strengthen controls and reduce recurrence. Over time, this learning posture builds trust internally and externally because it shows the organization can improve rather than deny. Culture is also shaped by how people talk about uncertainty, because AI systems often operate with incomplete information about future behavior. In a healthy culture, it is acceptable to say we do not know yet, and then to propose a safe plan to learn, such as a constrained rollout, monitoring, and clear thresholds for action. In an unhealthy culture, uncertainty is treated as weakness, so people hide it and make absolute claims, which later become damaging when reality disagrees. A strong culture therefore rewards honest uncertainty paired with responsible action, rather than rewarding confident language that is unsupported. This is particularly important in executive reporting, vendor discussions, and public messaging, where overpromising can create a second incident later. When the culture supports responsible uncertainty, teams are more likely to choose safeguards early and avoid pretending that testing once means safe forever. That mindset supports lifecycle governance because it keeps reassessment normal when models change, data shifts, or usage expands. Another cultural driver is whether the organization treats AI risk as everyone's job or as someone else's job. If people believe risk is owned only by a distant governance team, they will stop thinking critically and will route decisions away from themselves, even when they are the closest to the reality of use. A healthier culture makes risk awareness a shared skill, where builders, users, and leaders each understand their role. Builders consider risk during design and deployment choices. Users verify outputs appropriately and report anomalies, and leaders support safe decisions even when they slow a timeline. This shared responsibility does not replace accountability. It complements it by ensuring that weak signals are noticed at the edges, not only at the center. When a culture is strong, teams ask better questions earlier, and that early questioning reduces the chance of public harm later. The organization becomes more resilient because it is not dependent on a single gatekeeper catching everything. As we close, strengthening AI risk culture is about creating an environment where safe behavior is rewarded, ownership is clear, and speaking up is safe. Incentives shape what people prioritize, so leaders must visibly value responsible actions like validation, monitoring, and appropriate constraints, not only speed and output volume. Accountability ensures that decisions and controls have owners who stay engaged over time, especially as systems change and exposure grows. Psychological safety ensures that concerns and near misses surface early, which is how organizations prevent small issues from becoming big trust events. When these elements align, policies are followed more naturally, shadow use declines, and incident response becomes calmer and faster. Most importantly, culture makes governance real because it turns written expectations into consistent daily behavior. If you can recognize culture as a risk control in itself, you will be able to reason through complex scenarios with more clarity and choose responses that actually change outcomes.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.